No one likes to be made fun of, not even adults, especially while trying to do their jobs. With the COVID-19 pandemic, anti Asian racism is on the rise. What we can do to fight it coming up on Activate Live.
Activate your voice! Activa tu voz! Activate it now!
Speak up, speak out.
Get involved, get involved.
Engage-toi.
Take action!
Aktiviere deine Stimme.
We're union and we're proud.
Welcome to Activate Live. I'm Tanya Hutchins with the Machinists Union coming to you from Washington, D.C. We'll get to our interview in just a moment, but first, here's what's happening in our union. The Machinists Union is postponing its 2020 convention by 1 year due to the coronavirus in order to protect the safety and health of members and guests. The IAM Executive Council made the difficult decision to reschedule the convention for September 12th to the 17th, 2021. The location will still be in San Diego. The international president wrote a memo addressing election of delegates, alternate delegates, and constitutional amendments. The IP thanks General Vice President Gary Allen, the Western Territory, and the 2020 Host Committee for all of their hard work. Well, IAM Local 701 members in the Chicago area have produced more than 10,000 face shields for first responders. The city of Chicago and others around the world. Health experts say the clear plastic personal protective equipment is an effective deterrent to the coronavirus. The tool and die makers at Federal Signal and University Park usually produce police, fire, and tornado sirens. And starting on June 6th, Guide Dogs of America will hold the Corpus Canine Classic motorcycle ride in honor of the late former IAM International President, George Corpus. The 1,400-mile trip will start in Mukilteo, Washington, make a stop in Arcata, California on June 10th to celebrate Corpus's 88th birthday, and continue on to GDA headquarters in Sylmar, California. Corpus passed away in late 2019. It's Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month, a time to celebrate the accomplishments, culture, and history of the more than 20 million Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders in the United States. But we can't let anti-Asian racism overshadow all of those achievements to date. Joining us now to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly is the president and co-founder of Can't Stop, Won't Stop Consulting, Gregory Cendana. Thanks for joining us, Greg.
Thank you so much for the invite and having me.
Well, the Asian American population is so diverse. Can you describe how diverse it is?
Yeah, so I'll just a little bit of history. In 1968, the term Asian American was actually coined by some student activists, including Yuji Ichioka and Emma G., who thought about having a unifying political identity for Asian ethnic groups to use as they actually resisted U.S. imperialism in Southeast China. And during that, Southeast Asia. During that time, there was also the use of the term Oriental as a derogatory term for Asians in the U.S. So it was a effort to try to unify the Asian American community. In the 1980s, actually, the U.S. Census Bureau grouped folks of Asian ancestry with those Pacific Islander, and then finally in 2000. Asian and Pacific Islander became two different separate racial categories.
So how do you identify, Gregory, so we can get to know you a little bit?
Yeah, so I identify as Asian American, specifically as Filipino American. I'm also a dancer. I'm also organizer and strategist. And yeah, those would be some of my identities.
Now, who are some of the people in the AAPI community that serve as your role models?
You know, I've been thinking about this question a lot, and I think about it every May during Heritage Month. Some people that I would like to lift up, one person is Yuri Kochiyama. Yuri is actually the person that you can see on my sweatshirt here. That's alongside Malcolm X, and was a longtime organizer and was critical to building cross-racial solidarity. I also think about people like Kent Wong. Kent Wong was the founding president of the Asian Pacific American Labor Alliance. He's the current director of the UCLA Labor Center and a continued fighter for justice and liberation. And then I also think about leaders of today, like the current president, Monica Tamarath. who is the first Southeast Asian and the youngest to ever serve in the position. And so I think about folks who helped pave the way, folks who continue to pave the way, and folks that I'm honored to march along side by side.
Now, I know you are probably a role model for a lot of people out in the community now. How does that feel to you?
I feel really blessed to have the opportunities that I've had to be able to learn, to grow, to be in community with so many different diverse peoples from across the country, across the globe. And I think it's an important part of my heritage too. When I think about the kind of impact I want to leave on the world and on people, I want people to be happy, to feel joy, to feel free, that they were able to be their full selves. And the more that I could pass that on, and the more that I can give that kind of energy and support to more folks to be able to do that, I think the happier that I'll be and the more fulfilled I'll be.
Well, we appreciate your work, Gregory. We really do. You know, there have been some frightening statistics about how the COVID-19 is disproportionately affecting workers of color. And if that's not enough to deal with, we have frontline workers of Asian descent are also dealing with outright racist behavior. What are some of the things that have been happening out in the communities?
Yeah, I'm really happy that you lifted this up, because I think that there are a lot of things that people should know. One, there is the Stop API Hate Reporting Center that is being put on by the Asian Pacific Policy and Planning Council. There are almost 2,000 incidents that of Asian hate and violence that have been reported from across the country, and that number continues to rise. I think, and I think in addition to the hate that is coming from the pandemic, it's also very clear that as you mentioned, the disproportionate impact that is being had on workers and workers of color. So to give us a little bit more statistics that I think kind of illuminates kind of the challenges before us, is that counties with higher populations of Black Americans accounted for 54% of COVID-19 diagnoses and 58% of those deaths of the virus nationally. Folks, members of the Latinx community are dying at higher rates in states like California and New York, which are some of the hardest hit, some of the hardest hit cities and counties in the country. And then there's also reports that the infection were particularly high for folks in Navajo Nation and other Native communities. And particularly as it relates to Native Americans, which includes Alaska Natives, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders, there's not enough data. So we don't even know the full picture of the impact that this pandemic has on API communities, on all workers of color, and in particularly, like to add on the additional layer of the ongoing and existing racism and prejudice that folks have faced, like even outside and continue to face even outside of the pandemic. So I think a lot of people are coping with a lot, are trying to figure out ways to support one another. And I think it's also an opportunity for people to really think differently about what does safety and security mean? How do we actually become safe and secure? Like, are there other models that we could be looking at? And how do we actually make sure that we're here for one another and that we center humanity and center love and joy in anything that we do?
You mentioned those numbers and how it's hard to get a lot of the numbers in the Asian American and Pacific Islander community. How do we improve upon that in terms of, making sure that those numbers are counted? Because I know not every jurisdiction, keeps track of hate crimes. What can we do to try and make sure those numbers are counted?
Yes. So I think first and foremost, I would encourage folks, whether you've experienced the anti-Asian racism yourself or see it happening, to report it to the Stop API Hate Reporting Center. I think that I think structurally, one thing that people continue to fight for is also disaggregated data, because I think right now, Asian Americans and sometimes Pacific Islanders are all clumped into one category, but it's really important to see that broken down by ethnicity, because there are different stories to be told, especially when we're thinking about disparities in education and healthcare and employment and things of that nature. It's important that, so if your county, your state doesn't actually collect disaggregated data, so not only Asian data, but also by ethnic groups and Pacific Islander data by ethnic groups, like to try to advocate for policy change for that to happen, because that's first, that's another way to be able to ensure that as comprehensive of data is available as possible. And then I think the last thing that I would share on this question is to be mindful of like when people say people of color, like, are they actually talking about all communities? Or are they talking about specific communities? And encouraging folks to really name, if you're talking about a particular community, it's okay to name that community, but don't say people of color as an umbrella when you're only talking about one or two communities. Like if you're talking about Black folks, say it's okay to say Black communities. If you're talking about Asian American, Pacific Islander communities, say that. And if people are using people of color, to make sure that across the board that they're being inclusive in their methodologies, inclusive in their practices, that people of color from all races and ethnicities are included in that conversation or in that definition.
Gregory, I don't think I'm alone when I think, why is this still happening with hate crimes in 2020? I just don't get it. I mean,
yeah, I mean, I wonder that every day still too, especially when I'm seeing the increased reports, the amount of racism that's still, and xenophobia that's still happening. Unfortunately, we have an inhabitant in the White House that is continuing to fan the flames and is not necessarily creating space or opportunity for more nuanced dialogue and openness. There's also, I think, a demographic shift that's happening, Tanya, if I can be honest with you, that there's that people of color are now the majority in our elementary schools. By 2050, people of color will likely be in the country. And so I think that there's also a concern, or like a challenge of what does it look like for that kind of demographic shift. And people are reckoning with it and are addressing it and dealing with it in different ways. And it's going to be an ongoing conversation. And I'm afraid that I don't know if it's going to end in the near future. And so that's why it's important. And I believe that cross-racial solidarity is not only critical to our survival, but critical to us really reimagining and re-envisioning what the world, what this country could look like, where all of us can be free and all of us could be our full selves and live with joy and happiness.
I'm so glad that you mentioned cross-racial solidarity, because you're on the board of 18 Million Rising, and on its website, it talks about co-conspirators instead of allies, which I love. More now than ever, we can help. So tell us how we can all be better co-conspirators.
I love that frame too, and it's something that I try to talk more about because, for me, co-conspirators is another level. It's another level of commitment. It's another level of action. It's another level of showing support for one another, for our communities, for our family members, for those most marginalized. And for me, there's a couple of different ways that can show up. From like one thing that I've been talking with people about is how are we challenging our family members and our friends and close ones when they say something racist or when they say something something hurtful or harmful, xenophobic, homophobic, transphobic. Like how are we actually calling folks in, explaining to them how that could be harmful and how we can be better about how we are engaging and talking to each other and engaging with each other. I also think that it's also about, for me, creating more space where people feel nurtured and feel loved and they can be themselves and feel joy. And so when I think about spaces like that, for me, I think about dance and I think about how do we actually create more space where people can dance like no one is watching, that people can be able to smile and not have to worry, like look behind their back or worry that someone, whether it's going to be coming to attack them, And I think that there are different models for transformative justice that include pods and mutual aid and other local community safety programs and models that I think we should be learning more about, that we should be replicating, that we should be taking to different scales, and really relying on loved ones and close folks that we identify as close folks, people that we have close relationships with and that we love and respect, to be the core and heart of how we stay safe and stay secure. And so I think that's something else I would do. And then lastly, I think there's also an important time right now, especially in the time of social media, where it's important that we actually intervene in moments. And sometimes that may mean putting your physical body in the line. But if that's what's needed for folks to feel safe and secure, then that's what's needed. I know I've been seeing many people show like with videos or like pictures of people getting hurt or people like, and my question to them is like, well, instead of videotaping, how come you're actually not trying to intervene or trying to say something and actually like push back or um, find a way to support the person that's being harmed, whether it's vocally or physically or in other ways. And so I think that those are some things that I would think about. But as I'm reflecting on Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month, as I'm reflecting on us being in a pandemic and in a global health crisis, I strongly believe that cross-racial solidarity is the way and the path. And the more that we could be able to facilitate that, help people understand and make people come together in ways that are unique and are nurturing and loving, I think that's the way to go.
Okay, I think you already answered this question. Oh, here's a comment from Rhonda Rogers. She's saying we must learn to be activists when we don't think a particular thing affects us. We can't be silent. Yes, I think that's what Gregory is trying to say. Also, Bill Lipinski saying, awesome topic to discuss. Hello from Chicago. Thank you so much for joining us, Bill. The question that I think that Gregory already answered is, oh, and Frank Saptel says, excellent and important topic. Thank you, Frank, all the way from Canada. But the question that I thought you already answered was, I was going to say, you know, it's one thing not to be racist, but it's a different thing to be an anti-racist. And I think part of what you just described is the attributes of an anti-racist. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. It's for me, there's a lot about action, right? And people talk about intent. People talk about, well, I had this thought or this feeling. And for me, the action component is so critical, both in terms of being an anti-racist, but also to be a co-conspirator. Like co-conspirators for me are people who are actively joining me in the struggle, actively joining me in the fight. They maybe not necessarily, as one of the viewers were commenting, they may not necessarily have been directly impacted or directly faced, but they have enough sympathy and empathy to be able to know that we all struggle in different ways, that we all face challenges in different ways, and that the more that we can come together and share those experiences, build trust, build community, share love and nurture, that's the way. And I think it's important, especially in this moment, in terms of anti-racism, that we talk about the impacts of anti-Blackness. We talk about the impacts of white supremacy. And that doesn't necessarily mean everybody white is a white supremacist. That's not what I believe. But I think that there's an important moment and role for white folks right now, and especially because of the increased amount of racism, to be able to be co-conspirators with other people of color and to show solidarity by checking loved ones, families, community members. And that work is challenging and tough. And I'll say that even as an Asian American and Filipino American, I have to have some of those challenging conversations with my own family and talking about how anti-Blackness shows up in some of those ways. But it's critical work. It's necessary work. And it's all in part of how we become unified and really practice solidarity, both in our lives, but as we continue to support and uplift other communities and other people.
You know, I met you through the Asian Pacific American Labor Alliance, APALA, and APALA has spoken out about xenophobia and racism, and, you know, people of all ethnicities have signed on, you know, to support a lot of the initiatives online. You know, I know APALA is one resource, but what are some other resources that you'd like to share if viewers would like to get more information Even if it's something as simple as, what do you do? What do you say if you're at work, you're on the job, interacting with coworkers or interacting with the public, and you need to speak up and you can't find the words? I mean, some people just don't know what to say.
Yeah, absolutely. So one training that I've been telling people about is a training that's put on by organization called Hollaback, HOLLABACK exclamation point, and they do bystander intervention trainings. So that they specifically are training people and are providing trainings for that. If people do see something or hear something, that they could be able to have the skills and the tools needed to have those conversations. You mentioned Apala. I think I continue to shout out Apala, especially for API Heritage Month. They have an amazing campaign right now that's uplifting frontline workers who are API. And they have a ton of resources, and even have a COVID-19 fund for members who have been impacted and who need support. I would also mention a couple of other organizations. You talked about them a little bit before, but 18 Million Rising. 18 Million Rising, I'm proud to serve as the board chair. They are an organization that works with the Asian American community and does a lot of work digitally. And they are at 18mr.org. Another organization I would lift up is United We Dream. United We Dream is the largest immigrant youth organization that I'm also proud to be a board member of. And they have been able to have a ton of resources, Know Your Rights resources, and they've also started a fund, the National Undocu Fund, to support folks who are undocumented, because many undocumented folks, or actually all undocumented folks, aren't included in any of the stimulus. They are continuing to be attacked by ICE and by other agencies in terms of their families being split apart. So there's a particular need for undocumented folks to be supported. And so would lift those up as well. And then the last one I'll share is the People's Collective for Justice and Liberation. The website is People's Collective for the number 4jl.org. It's an organization that I was proud to co-found, but it was actually specifically about providing interventions that address anti-Asian racism while building cross-racial solidarity. And we do monthly town halls. We're launching a new COVID campus next month, which is like intimate workshops and roundtables where people can learn more skills. And so I would encourage you all to check them out. The People's Collective for Justice and Liberation. That's People's Collective, the number 4jl.org.
While you were describing the training, we had Jerry on our Instagram live behind the scenes saying bystander training, yes, please. So you definitely hit a nerve there. I think a lot of people get a lot of information out of that and use, especially white allies. So this is really great information. We appreciate you giving it to us. Just to switch gears a little bit, how are you coping personally with this pandemic?
I appreciate you asking. You know, I've been really feel really blessed and grateful to be safe and healthy, but I'm constantly reminded about how there are many folks who maybe aren't as lucky. I'm thinking about and staying grounded with like the 40 million folks who are now unemployed during this time, and that doesn't even include folks who are undocumented or who haven't applied for unemployment. And then I'm also just thinking about my family a lot. My parents, my sister, other family, many who are in California. My dad and aunts are essential workers, and I've continued to be going to work every day. And so I continue to pray and for their safety. And it just reminds me that, especially for working people, people don't realize it's like how much of a risk it is to get the deliveries that they need to get, to be able to go to the grocery store, to the pharmacy. And so I try to ground myself in things that I can be grateful for, and to help remind people that, in order for them to get that delivery or for them to get their food or those groceries, that many people have to put themselves on the line, and we have to be grateful. We have to demand that they get, we have to demand that they get hazard pay, additional health and safety protections, and to continue to remind people that we are all human and that we need to center humanity as much as possible.
Gregory, when this pandemic is all over, what is next for you?
Well, as I mentioned, because my family's in California, I'm hoping to visit them because I'm an extrovert and also like I like giving hugs, and it's been hard to not be able to hug my family, especially with just everything that's going on. So when things are when I'm able to, one of my first things will be to travel back to California and give my parents and other family a big hug.
Oh, I know that is so hard to do, especially with extroverts. Um, Anything else that you'd like to mention? What did we miss?
Um, I don't think that I don't know if there's anything else. I would just share that what's one thing that I do like about Heritage Month is that it's also my birthday month, so I'm celebrating my birthday coming up. But other than that, thank you. So I'm grateful to be for another rotation around the sun, and I think I laugh because I say that my birthday is at the end of the month. That it's like the end of Heritage Month and the beginning of Pride Month, which is like an intersection of my identities, and so it's like a bridge and go from one Heritage Month to Pride Month.
So does that mean you're a Gemini?
That does mean I'm a Gemini.
Learn these little things. Well, thank you so much, Gregory Sandana. We appreciate you taking the time to speak with us.
Thank you so much again for the invite. I'm continue to be grateful for the opportunity, and shout out to all the Machinist members. I love when I was at Apollo, we worked very closely with the Machinist Union. So thank you for your continued leadership and support.
All right, keep in touch. Thank you. That was Gregory Sandana of Can't Stop, Won't Stop Consulting. You can keep the comments coming. Let us know what you think right here on this video. Have you witnessed prejudice and discrimination in the workplace? What did you do about it? Share your story no matter which social media platform you are watching. And thank you to everyone that has been commenting so far. Well, we want to give you a heads up about a live stream that is happening this Thursday on the AFL-CIO's Facebook page. Now, this is happening tomorrow. It starts at 2 p.m. Eastern, and it features voices of essential workers on the front lines, some of whom have been the hardest hit. All of the AFL-CIO's constituency groups will be presented, as you see here: CLUE, LACLA, APRI, Pride at Work, APALA, and CBTU. Spread the word to your union siblings. Now, on the same day, the United States of Women is honoring the incredible women of the Asian American Pacific Islander community in an online conversation called Women in the AAPI Community, Trailblazing in Times of Uncertainty. It's also tomorrow, Thursday, but it's at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 Pacific. Also, tomorrow, if you want to make a day of it, a text bank party takes place called Angry Asian Americans Activate the Vote. Apala and Next Gen American are hosting from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern. For more information, you can visit nextgenamerica.org and search events, and it'll bring you to this page here where you can fill out the information and sign up. So there's a lot going on. We're just trying to bring you as much information as possible. Well, here's a look now at this week in labor history. On May 30th, 1973, Crystal Lee Jordan was fired for trying to organize a union at the J.P. Stevens plant in Roanoke Rapids, North Carolina. Now, she was the inspiration for the Academy-winning movie Norma Ray, which was released in 1979. And if you can believe it, I was 12 years old when that movie came out, and it is still a classic. Before we go, we'd like to bring you the latest from Labor 411. You can show your union pride with all new masks and shirts. All merchandise is union made and or made in America by ethical companies that give workers a voice on the job. Labor 411 donates 10% of every purchase to worker organizations. Just visit labor411.org and click on the store in the upper right-hand corner. And I want to give a quick shout out to I Am Local 2323 in Canada. They do fundraisers every month, at least the Young Machinists do. And this month they're doing a candle fundraiser. So we're going to put a link to that in the comments later on. John Limbo says, don't forget to watch the launch of Dragon 5 in the USA with American astronauts. The new capsule has IAMAW built composite panels on it. All right. So it's 4:33 Eastern time today. Go Machinists. Thank you so much, John, for reminding us about that. I love it when viewers just write in, and we want to make this as interactive as possible. So thank you so much to all of our viewers and everyone commenting. So join us next week when we continue our series on mental health and wellness. Stay safe and healthy until then.